Hey, somebody needs to stack the boards. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to The Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today and with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. The Professional Noticer sponsored this week by our friends at Tucker ATV. You know, the sheer variety of power sport products at Tucker ATV is incredible. Hustler turf equipment, the entire line of Echo power tools, and of course, Tucker ATV carries every make and model of Polaris ATVs, the big Polaris side-by-sides, and the even bigger Ranger Cruise. And you have to see the showroom. The taxidermy, the antique displays, and an indoor porch with its porch swing and comfortable chairs, television, and coffee that's free. So stop in and meet Shannon and Lisa Tucker. They're awesome friends of ours. They treat customers like family, which is why folks from 14 states have done business with Tucker ATV. Highway 43 North in Jackson, Alabama, Tucker ATV, the small town business with the national reputation. Okay, observations and answers. That's what we do here on The Professional Noticer. We love it when somebody comes to the peace table with both. And today we have a very unusual episode, one that I am really looking forward to. This is kind of a new friend of mine, and we were kind of introduced by Hoss Mack. Some of you know Hoss Mack. He's our sheriff here. I mean, you know you're in good hands when you got a sheriff named Hoss. But he had looked at some wood I had gathered, and I said, yeah, I'm really looking to find somebody that has a mill. And he said, what? Now, do you know Bryan Chandler? And I said, no, I don't. And he said, man, he is just unbelievable. And just, he sang Bryan's praises and said, yeah, he owns Silverhill Mill up in Silverhill, Alabama. And man, I just love the work he does. And so I Googled Silverhill Mill and I found him and I drove up there and I met him. It's like we were best friends in about 3 minutes. And so I've been back several times with Bryan and his wife, Ree, and this fascinating mill that they have and the work they do with wood that a lot of people would just kind of toss aside maybe, but he takes pieces and bits and does fascinating things with it. So today we're talking wood with Bryan Chandler of Silverhill Mill. Hey, buddy, how are you?
Great.
Man, I just saw you a couple of days ago.
It was.
And here we are again. I'm fascinated by what you do, Bryan, and you've got this big, massive saw thing. What is that called?
Well, a bandsaw, sawmill. It's a woodland mills.
Yeah, it's more than what I think of as a bandsaw.
Yeah.
This is like for logs.
Yeah, I mean, I can do, logs up to 30 inches in diameter, and that's a fairly large tree.
Right. And you got this awesome barn that encloses all the stuff. And I was looking at the barn, and you told me you guys made it.
Yeah, Hurricane Sally, we kind of destroyed one of our smaller barns, and we lost like 42 pine trees just in our yard from Hurricane Sally. So,
oh my gosh.
The irony is the sawmill was delivered 6 days before Hurricane Sally hit. So it wasn't that we were planning, but it was just, coincidence, that we received it, just a week before. So, we milled our own wood, built our, 24 by 70 pole barn. My wife and I, other than putting up the metal rafters, I had a little help, but, she put me up on the up on the forks with a pallet and had my 2x6s, and I say, raise me up, and the next thing I knew, I was going down. So it was a challenge, but we got it built. So
Well, when you have a wife that can drive a tractor, that's just,
that's I guess this was a hobby that's kind of turned more into a full-time second job. But as you have seen firsthand, she's out there with me each evening, weekend, right by my side. So, she's as much part of it as I am. So
Yeah, I mean, when you call this like a family business, it really is a family business. So how did you, before we go into wood and stuff like this, I'm curious as to how this started with you, because this is like, I mean, I don't know if you're imagining what a sawmill would look like, but you've seen these old versions of these sawmills back in the, maybe early in the 1900 or something like this. This is the modern version of that. It's like a smaller
Correct.
mill. It's not some massive undertaking.
You're thinking of like one of the wheels, that spun,
Right.
vertically, where mine's
Right.
more horizontal.
And yours is horizontal,
Yeah.
just a big saw belt. Yeah.
Right. But to get started, my wife and I have some property up in central Alabama, and we wanted to build our own house. And we say, as you can tell, we're DIYers walking around our place. We do everything ourselves. And so we just wanted to have something we could mill it. And, with the hurricane, that kind of threw us into it. And then when I said, well, we need a name, I said, I need to form a little company here. And, I'm from Silverhill, which Silverhill was established in the late 1800s. And the name of the town, the people worked at a sawmill up on a hill. And they would walk up each day to get paid in silver for their wages.
Really?
And that's how Silverhill got its name from. So, we kind of paid, that toward the town. And I said, well, Silverhill Mill would be perfect.
Silverhill Mill is perfect.
Yeah.
And you got your own logo. I know Matt's getting a close-up of that. And so how big a learning curve was it when you had the mill put in?
Yeah, I mean, you receive it in two big crates, kind of put it together.
That would kill me right off the bat.
Well,
I'm sure it had directions.
It
look
was
at directions in my mind.
It was probably
blank.
50-60% already assembled, but so I had my about 10-year-old nephew helping me
there you go.
holding the nuts and the bolts and doing that. So it's not you just put a log on there and start milling. I mean, there's a lot of keeping it maintained, keeping it tuned. It's kind of like a car. You gotta, because you want the best boards cut, because if you're not, then you'll get wavy boards, and nobody likes to see wavy boards. So, you spend a lot of time, and so it'd be 2 years to September. So I've come a long ways with it, and feel, more comfortable, know what to do and not to do.
Yeah.
So as we found out. So, but it's just trial and error.
That it does fascinate me, because when you see you do it, when you see you pushing the saw through the log, it just seems like, well, that's all there is to it. But you're right. I've watched you do just minute little adjustments and the maintenance on the thing, because there's water that comes out against the blade to keep the blade cool,
Right.
and there's a bucket for the dust, and and the rollers of the logs. It seems like a lot of adjusting.
A lot of that and a lot of manual labor. We've come to the point where my wife and I have decided that this has become a business of ours, that we needed to kind of go to the next level. And we have a new mill on order, but due to our environment, when I ordered it was 14 months out, and now I'm down to about 12 months out. So, you roll a log, people don't really realize, a 12-foot log, 20 inches diameter, how many thousands of pounds. And I have a cant hook. It's just a big pole with a hook that you kind of lodge it there and you roll it. And my age, that's you're rolling a 2,000 or 3,000 pound log. So
yeah, because you're like 22.
Yeah,
it makes you
22.
It has made you look a lot older.
Yeah. So we're going full hydraulic.
Okay.
So it'll make my life a lot easier, more productive. I do some dimensional stuff, but as you can tell, my true passion is with the hardwoods. It's kind of like a box of chocolates. You just don't know until you open it up what you're going to get.
That's exactly the way I feel. I got interested in wood with Austin doing his knives, and Austin would say this wood is such and so density, and a 12-inch block weighs this, and I was fascinated by all the different kinds of wood and the look, and of course he's making knives, so he can take junk wood and make it
something nice,
look very nice. But you're doing the same thing with bits and pieces, because you're not just milling stuff for boards and stuff for people. You're actually, I guess, manufacturing your own product.
Yeah.
So show me some of these things.
Well, you should remember this one. This is your spalted maple that you brought up a couple months ago, and you were so nice to give me a couple slabs, and it's just so much character. I have a gentleman, I'll show you here, a gentleman in town that has his own like a wood burning machine. He burns my logo on all my boards. When I first started, I had a few boards that didn't have the logo, and people said, I want the logo on it. I said, all right, I'll get the logo for you. So they were mad. They weren't going to take my board until I had my logo put on it. So, but that's spalted maple. Is such a beauty. I'm not telling you anything. It's just early form, wood rot, all the spalting going on in it. And, the more bug holes, the merrier for me, because, I can fix those and fill them up, but it just gives the wood character.
And this is a cool piece to talk about, because spalted wood is very valuable.
Right.
And yet it's in the initial stages of rot.
Right.
And that's what makes it valuable, because you can look at a tree, and it's rare that you look at a tree and think there will be spalting in there until it's cut down.
You just don't know.
You just don't know. And it's one of those odd things, kind of like a jubilee. Mm-hmm. You can't predict it. And so, but I was actually able to predict this piece, because it was a maple that had two forks, and one of them had already fallen, and it got drug away to the dump or whatever. And I looked at the edging, where they'd cut it off, and I was like, oh my gosh. And this one is leaning badly. And so it's like I put a 24-hour guard on this tree thinking this is going to fall sometime.
Well, everybody needs to know, when he was there at my house and we were milling those, if you've ever seen a 12-year-old child at Christmas time and knowing what they're probably going to get for Christmas and just oozing with excitement, that was Andy, because you were having a blast every time we sliced.
Well, it is. It's like Christmas. You don't know what you're opening up.
It's just, every piece was just beautiful. To us, it is. Now, some it may, but how can you say that's not beautiful wood there?
I mean, it's just gorgeous. But I knew that one was going too. And so I watched it for 3 years, and then when Hurricane Sally took it down, I grabbed it.
Right.
And of course it broke it about 12 feet up and left this stump that was massive and about like a 12-foot log. But then the other pieces, the smaller piece, it was spalted all the way up into the limbs.
Yeah. It was quite beautiful. But you have a story, and that's what, a lady was going to buy one of my boards, said, I guess you probably have a story behind this. And come to think of it, every board that I've ever cut, there's a story behind it. And I think people appreciate that when they buy my cutting boards and charcuterie boards, because you wouldn't think it, but I can tell you every place I got every one of my logs, and what is the story behind that log? Was it saving it from a fire? Was it just going to rot to pieces in the woods? Whatever the case may be.
See, I think that makes it more valuable. I told Austin with his knives, I said, if you use wood that has a story, you're just miles above. A lot of knife makers, but when you can say, this is made out of the desk that my dad wrote The Traveler's Gift.
Right.
And, then the wood has a story or has a connection with people. And so that I just
this one here, this board here kind of started the whole craziness. After Hurricane Sally, FEMA truck sat in front of my yard for several days picking up debris. And a gentleman there that sits and watches them load the trucks, he said, "Hey, I have a piece of cedar. Could you cut it into donuts for me?" I said, "Sure." And he said, "Well, how much owe you?" I said, "Nothing." I said, "If you just find something unique on the side of the road," which I had already given up going down the side of the road because everybody was going to run you over after the hurricane.
Right.
I said, "Call me." 2 hours later, he calls me. He finds these 3 black cherry logs within a half a mile from my house that had been already cut down several years ago, but they finally brought it out with the rest of the debris. And at that time, I was not into making cutting boards or charcuterie boards. And this is one of the last pieces of wood that I have but that's black cherry. And there's only certain woods you can use for cutting boards: cherry, white oak, black walnut, maple, things of that nature, because a lot of your oaks are open porous and it can soak up. That's why I use some woods more as charcuterie boards.
So explain what that means, because because what you listed, those boards are the hardest of the hardwoods.
Correct.
Because everything has a density.
They call it the Jenga scale.
Yeah.
The Jenga scale. It goes up to a couple. It's just, I guess, the pressure, and they run it through some tests. I haven't seen it. I just look for my Jenga numbers, and once you get to 1,000 or higher, you have a very compressed hard wood. Also, the pores, you want a closed cell, not an open cell, like your oaks. Your white oak is your only closed pore cell in the oak family, white oak. Huh. They use it for your barrels for like Jack Daniels, right. Or I think that's what I've been told.
Yeah.
So because it's closed pore, so it won't, it'll kind of soak it, but it's just not going to, let it go.
And the white oak is what they use on the USS Constitution.
Okay. And probably for that same purpose.
Did you know that there is in Indiana, there is a grove of white oak that is owned by the Navy. And, the Constitution is the oldest, ship that's still going.
Right.
And so, but they have a forest of white oaks that the Navy owns that they use to replace wood on that ship.
That's crazy.
So, but that is interesting, the Jenga numbers and the closed cell and the open cell. And I guess that's why, Austin has showed me blocks of wood that you just look at, like you pick up a block of this and it's pretty light, mm-hmm. but it's hardwood, it's like an oak or something. Mm-hmm. Then you pick up a block of this and it's like, oh my gosh. And one of those is the Osage orange.
I know it well.
That
is one of the most dense, rot-free. It is like metal in wood.
Do you know? Because I did some research on that Osage orange because Austin said it was wearing out his saw blades, and so it is so heavy that when the boats on the Mississippi used to go, the pilot boats, that some of those guys would use an Osage orange stump as an anchor.
Really?
Yeah, and so
And it has unique fruit. I was walking on my dam at my lake up the country, and it was about the size of grapefruit, but it was looked like real coarse and just.
we used to call them horse apples.
Okay, well, don't bite into
Oh
them.
no, they're oh.
And then a friend says, "Man, you have any Osage orange?" And I said, "No, I don't know." He said, "Well, yeah, they got these things about the size of grapefruit, and they look. Oh, I got plenty of them there. I was kicking them off the dam." So that's how I found out I have Osage orange. So it's unique.
Your property it's perfect for somebody like us because you have so many species. It's like a kind of a microclimate.
It's strange. 3 years ago, I could tell a water oak and a live oak. Other than that, I couldn't tell you another hardwood out there. And it's just, just learning. I walk in the woods. My wife and I have about 100 acres up south of Montgomery in Crenshaw County. And it's very diverse property. I wouldn't call it virgin timber, but, we had some people from Auburn come out and do a walkthrough a few weeks ago, 1st of April. And he said it's probably 75, 80-year-old. So, it's not the old timber, but it's still pretty nice. And I said, there were some trees, that, he could not even identify.
Really?
Yeah, so we're teaming up with them. They're going to do a walkthrough with the Montgomery Extension, or they said the Montgomery Extension and the Crenshaw and the University of Auburn to kind of help me identify, the trees on the property. I said, what do you think I've got on this property? 50 to 75 different species? He said, you have way more than that. So it was I'll have to get you up there, but it's like a kid in a candy jar. And I'm not really going to cut. Mostly what I've used so far is what's fallen on the ground.
Yeah.
There's a couple species that I may take down, but, both you and I are avid outdoorsmen.
Right, yeah.
And so I'm not going to do anything detrimental to the wildlife, but there are some things that I can do to open up some areas. And also they don't really have any contribution to the food source for the wildlife.
Right.
So,
well, a lot of people don't understand logging an area or even select cutting, and which is why a lot of our national forests are getting to be animal free. Because now Yellowstone, the national forest out west, they have huge open meadow and grazing areas, but what people think of as a beautiful piece of is like where they walk in and there are these massive trees and there's no undergrowth and they can just see these massive, and people think that's beautiful, but that is devoid of wildlife. No deer, no turkey, nothing can, because there's no browse. Deer are browse animals and turkeys graze. And
when that gentleman told me, he said, well, cut down a couple of those little red maples. I said, like, cut down a little red maple? Oh, yeah, because the new growth is the deer love the new growth. So, yeah.
And so, and
have to think outside the box.
All they do, which is why a lot of timber management now, they select cut to open up areas. But even a clear cut, as ugly as it looks at first, that is where all the animals go. And within a couple of years, when that rush, that's where they're having their fawns. That's where they're laying their eggs. That's where they're sleeping. That's because nothing can approach them in that. Mm-hmm. You cannot get up on a deer or turkey going through a clear cut.
No.
And so you'll look, you drive along the side of the road and see this 40-acre clear cut and think, if you love trees but don't really understand, you can think, oh, this is horrible. But no, this is creating, if you don't cut, the property that I go to a lot, that I got this piece from, the property that I go to a lot, has not been managed. And so it's the growth, there's no new stuff. Because it's not select cut, it's not clear cut.
Right.
And so, but anyway, that's very interesting to see. And this is cherry. So What is that little thing? What's
Well, my wife picks up little pieces that I cut, and this is actually called a wine buddy. And she'll take little pieces of wood that I have and make something out of. So you just set this on top of a wine bottle, like so, and then put your wine glasses on each end, and it just makes it an elegant type piece to impress someone.
Wow!
So
what kind of wood is that?
that is black walnut also.
Wow, that is gorgeous.
Yeah, it was just going to be a scrap piece of wood that was going to make it to the burn pile, and we just, you can see at my house. When I cut hardwoods, I shave all the. You saw, I just don't go in and just cut and dig it out. I shave down and
Right.
Find something interesting, something different. I have a lot of people come that do arts and crafts, and I say, get you 3 or 4 pieces. Give me $20, $5, $10, whatever it is, and something that they can turn into a piece of art, really.
Wow. Now, what do you call?
Sapwood.
Okay.
So-
Explain the different kinds in that piece.
The different, the outside is your sapwood, and then the regular is the heart of the black walnut. This is probably looks like it came off a limb, so it's not a very big piece. My first batch of black walnut, I have a sister that you met at my house that day,
Right.
And they live in Murphy, North Carolina, just across the Georgia line. She said, "Bryan, you have to come see us." I said, "Well, you find me some logs, and I'll come visit." And lo and behold,
You're my sister, but give me a reason to come.
well, 6-hour drive, so she'll watch this and get after me. But so I went up there and got my first a load of black walnut, and we don't really have black walnut here in this part of the state. I did find a couple on my property, so I'm excited, but
Right.
I don't know if I want to cut them
But you're
down.
not going to cut them down.
Yeah, so I did that. Then I've met some other folks in that area that I've kind of gotten some relations with, and weekend before last I went up there to get a trail load of white oak. They use white oak up there like firewood. We cry for white oak here in
Yeah.
the South, and so
And generally, we find them, we don't cut them down because that's the preferred
acorn for deer.
acorn for deer, the big old sweet white oaks.
Yeah, so yes, I took a load of cedar with me because they don't really have cedar up in the mountains like we have. I took some white cedar or juniper, some people call it either
Right.
or, and they loved it. So I went with a load up and came back with a load back. So I kind of go up there about once every 3 or 4 months and pick up a load of. I brought some sourwood back. I didn't show you the sourwood.
Yeah.
We don't have sourwood. I've heard of sourwood honey.
Right, yeah,
And
I've
they
heard
put
of
the
that.
blooms, and beekeepers love sourwood trees because the bees, go to them. It just gives it a different flavor of honey.
What variety tree?
It's a hardwood. I mean, it had real scaly, tall bark on it. A lighter wood. I'm waiting for it to dry out. And that's the thing. I keep calling this my retirement because you take a 20-inch hardwood, and hardwood takes about 6 months for every inch to dry to some form of dryness that you can work with.
Right.
So you get a big log. That thing could be sitting out there for 2, 3, 4 years before you get working with it. Or I may go ahead and cut it into slices, and then you can tell I have plenty of things, but I want to build my own kiln.
Right.
A solar kiln, and so I can dry my wood and kind of speed that process up a little bit.
Yeah, it is fascinating. Most people would not know how much water is in a log
Man.
or how much air is in a log. Because just watching you saw those logs, and we take a slab off, well, it's just wet.
Well, and they're heavy. There's a myth, and there's 2 different sides. Especially when it comes to pine, wet or green wet pine and dry pine. And you saw my barn. We were milling it and nailing it up as fast as we were milling it.
Really?
Yes. And people say, well, you got to dry it, you got to do this, got to be treated, blah blah blah. I mean, there's some certain things you can do that can help, but I won't go into that. But think about all these older homes. They didn't have treated wood.
Right.
All these 100-year-old homes, they stand up better than what's being built today. So, and they didn't, they built a home close to wherever a forest was, or where they were standing timber, and started cutting and assembling the house. So,
right.
But oak, you have to let it dry, because if you're going to use for crafts, it works better when you're planing and chiseling and cutting. So, but pine is a little easier to work with.
When I say that there's more water and air in there than people think, the thing that fascinated me with the small pieces, for the knife handles and all, Austin stabilizes that wood. And so to stabilize it, he has this vacuum chamber that has a liquid kind of stuff that goes into the wood. But he puts that chamber with that liquid and then puts the pieces down in there, and then starts over here the motor with the vacuum pump, which is like, a couple of 1,000 pounds. I mean, it's not like a vacuum cleaner.
Right, but it's sucking all that.
So it starts sucking that air out, and you sit there and watch, and you're just shocked at the air, and it'll take 30 minutes to get the air out of it.
What dryness percentage does he? 7%.
He
content.
Does it down to about 3 or 4%,
really?
Because they're smaller pieces, so he can kiln them in an oven, but he'll it's amazing. It's like after 30 minutes, you look and go, there's still air coming out of this thing, and then when there's no longer air coming out of it, then they release the pressure, and that wood brings back those stabilizing materials into the interior of the wood, and it makes it where it won't ever warp, crack.
One thing that my wife Rhea is responsible of is, everybody says, well, why are the different logs, the ends all in different colors? I don't know if you noticed that before. So on hardwoods, not pine is the sap can seal it, but hardwoods, whenever we get a log, cut it, we paint the ends of the logs, because what you're doing is trying to give it an equal around the log for the water to evaporate over time. Because if you don't paint the ends, and we were buying that expensive anchor seal, $50 a gallon, and then we were buying for $9.99 mist tints at Lowe's. Well, we went there last weekend. Now they've gone up to $23 for a gallon of mist tint.
A mist tint?
Yeah, a mist tint. I said, what happened to the $9.99? Well, district said we're going to raise the price. But we paint the ends. And so that basically, it makes the water evaporate throughout the whole log. Because if you don't, then you see why you always see splits on logs, because all the water's evaporating on the ends, and you're getting all that stress. And that's what happens with all that cracking and splitting. So that's something we've learned. And so repaints all our logs on the end. It could be blue, it could be red, it could be white, black, whatever the color of the mist tints are.
Whatever the mist tint is.
Yeah.
That's cool. So what is that piece of wood?
This is cypress. I saved this from it was in somebody's wood burning pile, and they were about to burn it. It's a Sally tree. That's some early spalting also, and that's more of a charcuterie board. I wouldn't cut on it because it's a softer wood, but it's real light. But I liked it just with the color, just really pops, and
Yeah, the blue line.
Yeah, and it's weird. Some you get some of these. I've seen some with red streaks through them. It's just you just don't know until you do it. It's just crazy.
The box elder has red streaks, and they call that. I mean, when they find it with red streaks, they call it flame. Right. Box elder with flame, and that with flame
just added a lot of value
to
it. So that I've sold a lot of those.
So what's the difference in a charcuterie board and a
Well, a charcuterie board is more of a presentation.
Okay.
People. First of all, you got to help people pronounce it correct because they tear it up, and I say slow down, charcuterie. You'll get it, okay? So really, that's cheese and meats, in French.
Okay.
So it's really just a presentation board,
Right.
But the denseness on this is probably down lower than pine, so you can't get a
So you
knife
wouldn't
or
wanna
hard
cut 'em.
Yeah, I mean you can have a little cheese knife or something, but it's just pretty to show. And that now I've got a couple of these black walnuts here. So this is a black walnut from North Carolina.
Oh my
That
God.
was the first ones, and I really was going up there, thought I was going to get some of these big, gigantic logs, and then it turned out to be 10 or 12 inch. And then after kind of, I guess, good Lord was kind of looking after me, said, Bryan, I think I'll be able to do more with these than if I had a 20, 24, because, they make perfect, you can do that as a cutting board or charcuterie board, but, you see all the holes and all the knots, and, I had to do a little bit of epoxy on that, but, I don't want the perfect board.
Right,
the perfect board just doesn't.
This is character.
I mean, it's just all the I just leave all the knots and just I just like it.
But that's a lot of sanding too. I can tell.
It-
You did some work to.
Each board takes. I have a regular job besides this. My wife gets up at 5 in the morning to go. She works with special needs kids at school, so she rides the bus and in the morning and afternoon. So I'll get up with her and I'll go out there and work for a couple of hours, go to work. And then when I come back, it's either I'm going to be on the mill or I'm going to be working on my board. So, kind of.
Right.
So we've been doing a little milling. So I got to get back to doing some boards.
You can feel
It's
how,
heavy.
And you feel that this is just so much harder than the cypress.
Yes. And this was just another black walnut. Just talking about the character. Somebody said, "Well, you going to epoxy that?" And I said, "No, I'm going to just leave all that open there." And it's just.
I love that.
Yeah, it's just it's that's what's cool about it.
Yeah, that just. I mean, you're right. That just gives that.
It's just no two boards of mine are alike. So I sand it. I use 80, 120, 220, 320. I stop at 320. I'll clean it up good. I'll put 2 applications of food grade mineral oil
Yeah,
on it.
I was going to ask you, how do you treat them?
Yeah, so I put two coats of food grade mineral oil, and then the last coat is a mineral oil and beeswax mixture. And I said, well, man, I need to get into making my own board moisturizing. So, go on Amazon, get me some cups, and it's just, it looks like it's all that is food grade mineral oil and beeswax. And now I've even got my own beekeeper in Silverhill, so now I can say my beeswax is from Silverhill also. So he gave me a big block of beeswax. So you just
a pleasant smell.
yeah. So it's
Kind of like honey.
yeah. So it's I made some last year, and then the lady bought one can. Said, "Hey, how many do you have left?" I said, "I got 8 cans. I want to buy them all." Said, "My husband is putting it on every piece of wood in the whole house." You should, if you have any cutting boards, you should, first of all, never run them through a dishwasher.
Right.
Wash them in the sink, water, dry them off. But about every 2 or 3 months, you should put something on your boards to, preserve them, to keep them. Because if you don't do anything, they're going to start cracking, Now, what I do also, in between each sanding, I take a damp cloth. I see some people spray water and wipe it off. I just use a damp cloth. And what you're doing is you're wiping off the dust, but you're also raising the fibers on the board. Because if you ever used a board and you cleaned it and it felt rough all of a sudden because someone didn't put moisture on it to raise the wood fibers and then sand it again. So I wipe mine with a damp cloth every time I sand it because you're raising those fibers. So now when you wash this, it's going to remain smooth. If someone didn't do that, you'll like, ooh, that kind of feels a little
Which is
rough.
almost like every cutting board you bought from Bed Bath and Beyond.
Yeah, so that's what's happened if you ever feel that on. So sand it down and then wipe it and sand it again, and you'll stop that from happening.
Well, let me see the top
Yeah.
on that. This is fascinating.
I brought it for you.
Yeah, thank you. That's, I mean, I'm blown away by this.
Yeah.
This is,
It's just.
but I mean, this is like you and me.
And it's really not a moneymaker, but it just kind of ties the story into my customers. Because I have people call me now that'll say, "Hey, I need another can of that, or can you send me a can of this?" So it's quite amazing.
So what is this?
It's just another black walnut. I think I grabbed this one by accident, but just they call this my butcher block knife one there. Just something real simple. It's
I like it.
yeah, and perfect for a small cutting board or I have black walnut. I have white oak. One thing I have, and you probably hadn't seen it, and I didn't grab one. I have water chestnut oak.
Really?
I'm not water, swamp chestnut oak. You know what swamp chestnut?
Oh, yeah.
That's the acorns
That's
that get
acorns
real
that are
big.
massive.
And this one fell on the ground. I wouldn't have never cut that one down. And it really looks kind of like white oak with a little darker grain pattern in it.
Well, those swamp chestnut oaks are a variety of white oak.
Yes.
Yeah, and so but yeah, you'd prize, and you must have died.
I cried
it
when I saw it on the ground. Once I had my phone. I have a phone app.
Right.
I'll find a leaf, and phone app's great until it gives you 4 responses, and all 4 of them are like 10%, 10%, 10%. Like, help me here. Which one am I supposed to pick? But I was able to identify that one. So
one thing that is very curious to me, and I really started noticing this when people started sending their own wood to Austin, is that the pine that we grow now. Mm-hmm. is yellow pine or slash pine or whatever you want to call it. And it's very fast growing. There's an old saying in the timber industry: you plant pine for yourself, you plant hardwoods for your children, and you plant walnut or white pine for your grandchildren. Because that white pine is what, when they first came over to America, they were getting those monster white pines because that was what very dense grain, and it was good for mass of ships. Mm-hmm. And so they took almost nobody plants white pine anymore because it just takes a couple of generations to mature. But some people, like there's a couple that sent Austin some fence posts from their ranch that they wanted made into knife handles. And so when we were looking at it, he cut me a piece of it, and it's white pine. And so when you look at this is today's pine.
Yeah, the rings are so far apart.
Yeah, those rings are so far apart. And this is white pine cut from that fence post.
Wow, that is tight grain. And this is one, maybe 10-year-old tree, and that is 40, 50 years just in that one box there.
Right.
I mean, I had never come across white pine before, but that is beautiful.
And here is a and I hope when your guys go through your property, they find you some treasures, and that's what is amazing to me. It wasn't even after Hurricane Sally, but this land that I'm on a lot, it has a lot of limestone. Mm-hmm. So as trees get bigger, they just fall in the wind, and so I was going down one road in Polaris, and there was a tree. It was about that big around, but it had fallen across the road and was at the height that I had to get the chainsaw and cut it and just drag it off the road. But when I cut it, I looked at that stump, and it was all different colors. And I was like, what is this? And so I took the phone and took on the leaves and did the tree app, and there was like no match. And so I kept looking on the internet, couldn't find anything. And so I cut it. The tree was big enough that I cut 4 logs about this long, and they were about that big around. And so I took it. Right around the corner from us is a forestry guy, a doctor in forestry. And he looked at, and I took him pictures of the leaves, and I took him one of the logs with the bark, and he was like, I have no idea what this is. And so finally, there was a book called Trees of Alabama.
Okay.
And it's supposed to be the most,
Covers everything.
Everything that we have. And I finally found it is non-flowering dogwood.
Really?
And so, dogwoods don't get big trunks or anything like that.
Right.
And usually they're very showy. They're
all their white blooms.
Well, this is just a tree.
Just out there.
But then when I cut into it, I was astounded.
Really?
And so I've got some epoxy on it, but look at the colors.
Wow. The greens and the yellows and blue. I guess blues.
And purples.
Yeah, that is beautiful.
And and that's just like the raw wood.
Wow.
On the back.
That is.
But I've just got this.
If I find something like that, I'll let you know. But
I've got that hanging.
I'm going to look for that Hercules tree this weekend that we talked about the other day.
The toothache tree.
I'm going to have to see if that's it or.
That's a piece of that non-flowering dogwood.
Oh, and it's like a little bird.
Just like I just kind of shaped it a little bit and.
I cut a piece of my cherry, and I sold it last year sometime. I said, this almost looks like a blue marlin. And I said, all I got to do is just kind of work on the tail a little bit, and lo and behold, people just fell in love. But just something like this,
Right.
we're always saying, now what does that look like when we pull it off the mill or something?
I mean, look at that. Look at the eye.
Yeah, a bird's eye.
Yeah, so it's very cool, and that I guess the last thing we ought to tell them what a toothache tree is, because I had never even heard of it, and up at the hunting camp, this Martis is the caretaker for 35 years, and he told me, he said somebody came, they'd been cruising timber like 17 miles that way, and found a toothache tree. And I was like, what's that? He said, I never heard of it either. And doing the research on it, there's only like one video on YouTube about it. That's a guy that had one near his yard and found out about it. But it has like thorns. It may look like warts, but they're symmetrical. And they're sharp, thorns. But they call it a toothache tree or Hercules club, I guess, because if you hit somebody with
You're
that
gonna hurt
thing,
them.
that's going to hurt. But the toothache tree is because the Native Americans would use they cut a piece of the bark and just rough it up and put it like there on a tooth, and it's anesthetic.
Right.
I mean, and so I found a couple of them now, and and one had fallen naturally. The first one I ever found was on the ground. I was just like happy and horrified at the same time. But I took some of the bark from it and I put it in a blender and blended that bark up, and then put alcohol in that compressed stuff, put it in a dark closet for a month, and then strained that through a like cheesecloth or whatever. And I've got some friends that have like fever blisters, and that stuff is awesome. Because when we take people in the woods, we'll say, here, we'll cut just a little piece, like a thumb-sized piece, and say, here, just put it right here, put it on your tongue. And man, within 3 minutes, inside of your mouth is numb. And you can imagine how valuable that would have been 200 years ago.
Wasn't any dentist around the corner back then.
Yeah, but man, you can put it right in here, and man, you get numb from here to here. And after you take it out, it takes about 20 minutes to wear off. Mm-hmm. But I found in research, I also found that the settlers, the pioneers, when they were made aware of this by the Indians, that they would take it and pulp it up, and it was good for, like, when somebody got severely cut, they put it in that cut and leave it there for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then wash it out, and then they could sew it up, and nobody would feel the needle.
Wow.
And so
crazy.
But I think all this was fascinating, and what you have done is taken this to another level.
Well, thank you.
We're going to have, on the show notes, we'll have how to get in touch with you, and I hope people will visit your Facebook page and see all the stuff that you've got. And Bryan, just thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
To come over, and thank Ree for loaning you to us. And
anytime.
This is just fascinating. So I really appreciate it, and appreciate my gift of my wax.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you, buddy.
All right, you're welcome.
I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing the tiny bit of mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Circular hand sanders for the cast and crew provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional funding provided by poeticvariations.com. Friends, are you tired of the same old poetry you've been reading for years? Allow poeticvariations.com to renew your love for the rhyming word. No longer will Dad recite Joyce Kilmer's poetic masterpiece, Trees, on the first day of spring. I think that I shall never see a thing so lovely as a tree that may in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair. While the original version might be a masterpiece, it will never inspire giggling from the kids like poeticvariations.com's version of the same verse. Imagine the laughter when, on the first day of spring, Dad kicks off a fun-filled evening with a variation from our website. Here's an example. Toes by Joyce Kilmer. I think that I shall never know a thing so lovely as my toe. A toe that may in summer wear scabs from stumps everywhere. And we have multiple variations on single pieces. Of course, you've heard the classic, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? Well, check this out. How much ground could a groundhog grind if a groundhog could grind ground? Or this, how many boards would the Mongols hoard if the Mongol hordes got bored? Or this, how many lows could Rob Lowe rob if Rob Lowe could rob lows? As you can see, the variations are endless, and so is your fascination with Dad's new versions of tired old poems. Log on now, poeticvariations.com.